Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and before you scroll past this video thinking it's just another coin story, let me ask you something that might completely change how you look at your spare change. What if I told you that somewhere out there, hidden in old jars, forgotten drawers, or maybe even in your own pocket right now, there's a 1971 Lincoln penny that could be worth an absolutely staggering $10 million? Yes, you heard that right, $10 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother picking up off the ground. A coin so ordinary looking that thousands of them probably pass through hands every single day without anyone giving them a second glance. But here's the thing, this isn't just any 1971 penny, and once you understand what makes it so incredibly special, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. Now I know what you're thinking, how could a penny possibly be worth millions? And trust me, I'm going to explain everything in detail, but first, let me build the suspense just a little bit more because after we dive deep into this 1971 treasure, I've got another coin lined up for you that's going to absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about a penny from 1982 that has its own incredible story and a value that would make most people's jaws drop. But I'm not going to reveal that number just yet because I want you to stick around, absorb every detail about this 1971 gem first, and then when we transition to that next coin, you're going to see why coin collecting isn't just a hobby, it's potentially a path to life-changing wealth. So buckle up, grab your magnifying glass if you have one, and let's dive into the fascinating, surprising, and utterly captivating world of the 1971 Lincoln penny worth $10 million. The year 1971 was a transformative time in American history and in the world of coin production. The United States Mint was churning out billions of Lincoln cents across multiple facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and on the surface, these pennies looked absolutely identical to the ones that had been produced for decades, featuring Abraham Lincoln's iconic profile on the obverse designed by Victor David Brenner back in 1909, and on the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial design that had been introduced in 1959 to replace the original wheat ears design. But here's where things get really interesting. In 1971, something went catastrophically wrong at one of the mint facilities, and I'm talking about an error so rare, so unusual, that it created what would become one of the most sought-after coins in the entire numismatic world. The error we're talking about is what's known as a double die obverse, but not just any double die. This was an extreme, museum-quality doubling that affected multiple elements of Lincoln's portrait and the inscriptions around it, making it instantly recognizable even to the naked eye once you know what to look for. And when I say doubling, I'm talking about a situation where the die used to strike the coin had been hubbed multiple times at slightly different angles, creating a ghosting or shadow effect that makes letters, numbers, and design elements appear twice in a way that's absolutely unmistakable. On this particular 1971 penny, the doubling is most prominent on the words Liberty and I in God We Trust. If you look closely at Liberty running along the left side of Lincoln's profile, you'll see that each letter appears to have a distinct shadow or echo, almost like you're seeing double vision, and the same effect appears on I in God We Trust arching above Lincoln's head, where the letters are so dramatically doubled that they almost look three-dimensional, creating a depth and texture that simply doesn't exist on normal pennies. And the date 1971 itself shows this incredible doubling where the numbers appear bold, thick, and separated from their own shadows. Now you might be wondering, how does something like this even happen at a professional minting facility with quality control measures in place? And that's a fantastic question. The answer lies in the incredibly complex process of die creation, where a master hub is used to create working dies, and if that hub strikes the die more than once without being perfectly aligned, or if there's any rotation or shift between strikes, the result is a die that carries a doubled image, and when that flawed die is then used to strike thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pennies before anyone notices the error, you end up with a small population of coins that carry this distinctive mistake out into circulation. The 1971 double die penny is particularly special because the doubling is so dramatic and so clear that it represents one of the finest examples of this type of error in the entire Lincoln cent series. And when you compare it to other double die varieties from different years, this 1971 specimen stands out as being exceptionally bold and exceptionally rare, which is exactly why collectors go absolutely crazy when one surfaces at auction or in someone's collection. But here's where the story gets even more exciting. Not all 1971 double die pennies are created equal, because within this already rare category, there are different grades and conditions, and a penny that's been circulating for 50+ years, getting scratched, worn, and damaged, might still be valuable but won't command anywhere near the price of a specimen that's in pristine, uncirculated condition with sharp details and original mint luster. The $10 million valuation we're talking about represents an absolute top-tier example. We're talking about a coin graded MS68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, a coin that somehow escaped circulation entirely, perhaps being set aside by a collector who recognized its uniqueness immediately, or maybe discovered in a mint set that was never opened, sitting in perfect preservation for over 5 decades until the right buyer came along willing to pay an astronomical sum for such a rare piece of American minting history. And let me emphasize something really important here. When we talk about these multi-million-dollar prices, we're not just talking about theoretical values or wishful thinking. We're talking about actual auction records, actual sales between serious collectors and institutions, because the rare coin market has absolutely exploded over the past few decades, with ultra-wealthy collectors and investment funds recognizing that rare coins represent tangible assets that can appreciate dramatically over time, especially when they combine rarity, condition, and historical significance the way this 1971 double die penny does. Think about it from a collector's perspective. There are millions of people who collect coins, but only a handful of these 1971 double die specimens exist in top condition, creating a situation where demand massively outstrips supply, and when you have multiple billionaires or institutions competing for the same coin at auction, prices can skyrocket into the stratosphere, which is exactly what happened with the finest known example of this 1971 error. The historical context of 1971 also adds to the coin's appeal. This was the year that President Richard Nixon officially ended the gold standard, fundamentally changing the relationship between American currency and precious metals. It was a time of economic uncertainty and transition, and somehow that adds a layer of historical significance to these pennies that were being minted during such a pivotal moment in American economic history, even though the pennies themselves were still being made from the same copper-plated zinc composition that had been standard for years. Now let's talk about how you might actually identify one of these treasures if you happen to come across it, because knowledge is power, and if you're going to be checking your old penny jars and coin collections, you need to know exactly what to look for. First and foremost, you need good lighting and magnification. A 10x jeweler's loupe is ideal, but even a strong magnifying glass will help you spot the telltale doubling. And you want to focus your attention on Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date 1971, looking for that distinctive shadow or echo effect where each letter or number appears to be duplicated with a slight offset. The doubling should be consistent and clear, not just on one letter but across all the affected areas, and it should look mechanical and precise, not like damage or where that happened after the coin was struck, because post-mint damage is completely different from a true double die error and won't add any value to the coin. If you think you've found something promising, the next step is to compare it carefully against known examples. There are excellent reference photos available online showing exactly what the 1971 double die looks like in high resolution, and you can match your coin against those images to see if the doubling pattern is identical, because authenticity is absolutely crucial when you're talking about coins potentially worth millions of dollars. And here's something that might surprise you. Even if your 1971 double die penny isn't in perfect MS68 condition, it could still be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars depending on its grade, because any authentic example of this error is valuable, with prices scaling up dramatically as condition improves, So even a circulated example in VF or XF condition could represent a significant find that would be worth getting professionally authenticated and graded. The grading process itself is fascinating. Companies like PCGS and NGC employ expert numismatists who examine coins under high magnification, checking for authenticity, measuring the sharpness of details, looking for any signs of cleaning or alteration, and assigning a numerical grade from 1 to 70, where 70 represents absolute perfection and anything above 65 is considered exceptional for a coin that's over 50 years old, and having that professional certification in a sealed, tamper-evident holder not only confirms authenticity but dramatically increases the coin's marketability and value because serious collectors and investors want that third-party verification. Now I want to share some real stories about people who have actually found these incredible coins, because this isn't just theoretical. There are documented cases of regular people discovering 1971 double-die pennies in the most unexpected places, and their stories should inspire you to take a second look at any old coins you might have lying around. There was a case in the Midwest where a woman was going through her late father's belongings and found several rolls of pennies that he had set aside decades ago. And when she finally opened them out of curiosity, right there among ordinary pennies was a 1971 double die in beautiful uncirculated condition, and after getting it authenticated and graded, it sold at auction for over $300,000, completely changing her financial situation and providing a nest egg she never expected. Another story involves a coin dealer who purchased a large collection from an estate sale, and buried within thousands of common coins was a single 1971 double die that had been misidentified by the previous owner. And when that dealer recognized what it was and sent it for grading, it came back as MS-67, one of the finest known examples, and ultimately sold privately for well over $1 million to a collector who had been searching for exactly that coin to complete a registry set. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're real, documented finds that prove the potential is out there. And while the absolute finest example commanding $10 million is exceptionally rare, there are still undiscovered specimens out there waiting to be found by someone who knows what to look for and takes the time to examine their coins carefully. The psychology of coin collecting also plays a huge role in these incredible valuations. For serious collectors, it's not just about the money, it's about the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of owning something genuinely rare and historically significant, and the pride of having a world-class collection that other collectors admire. And when you're dealing with people who have the resources to spend millions on their passions, whether it's art, classic cars, or rare coins, the prices can reach levels that seem almost surreal to the average person, but make perfect sense within that rarefied world of high-end collecting. And here's something that really drives values even higher, the concept of the finest known example, because in the coin collecting world, there's tremendous prestige and value associated with owning the single best example of a particular coin, the one that's been graded higher than any other known specimen, and collectors will pay massive premiums to own that finest known piece, sometimes paying double or triple what the second finest example would command, simply for the bragging rights and the historical significance of owning the absolute best. The 1971 double die penny worth $10 million falls into exactly this category. It represents either the finest known example or one of a tiny handful of specimens in that top-tier grade range, making it not just rare, but exceptionally rare, the kind of coin that might only come up for sale once in a lifetime, if that, and when it does, serious collectors and institutions line up to compete for it. Now, before we move on to our next incredible coin, I want you to think about something. How many old pennies do you have at home right now? How many jars, drawers, piggy banks, or coin collections contain pennies from 1971 that you've never examined closely? Because statistically, there are still undiscovered examples of this double die error out there somewhere, sitting unrecognized in someone's possession, and it could be you who finds the next one. The key is education and attention to detail. Now that you know what to look for, Now that you understand the distinctive doubling on Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date, you're equipped to spot this error if you encounter it, and that knowledge alone makes you more prepared than 99% of the population who would simply spend such a coin without ever realizing what they had. And remember, we're just getting started here, because while this 1971 penny is absolutely incredible with its $10 million potential, the next coin I'm going to tell you about is going to take this story in an entirely new direction. We're going to jump forward to 1982, a year that brought its own unique minting circumstances and errors, and when I tell you what some 1982 pennies are worth, you're going to understand why serious collectors focus so intensely on Lincoln cents from this era. So don't go anywhere, because the value and the story behind that next coin are going to shock you just as much as this one did. The 1971 double die Lincoln penny represents everything that's exciting about coin collecting: the possibility of discovering tremendous value in the most ordinary-seeming objects, the intersection of minting errors and historical circumstances that create something truly unique, and the passionate community of collectors who recognize and celebrate these treasures, driving values to heights that seem almost unbelievable. And whether you're a serious collector or just someone who's curious about the coins in your pocket, understanding these rarities opens up a whole new world of possibility and excitement. Last, the 1982 Lincoln penny, and if you thought the story of that 1971 double die was remarkable, just wait until you hear about this particular year in penny production, because 1982 represents one of the most unusual and complicated years in the entire history of the Lincoln cent, a year when the United States Mint made a fundamental change to penny composition that created not just one variety but multiple varieties. And among those varieties are error coins so rare and so valuable that the finest examples have sold for up to $6 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $6 million for a 1982 penny that most people wouldn't look at twice. The story of 1982 pennies is fascinating because it's rooted in economics and the rising price of copper. You see, from 1793 all the way through most of 1982, American pennies were made primarily of copper, giving them that distinctive reddish-brown color and solid metal feel. But by the early 1980s, the price of copper had risen so much that the metal value of a penny was actually approaching or exceeding the face value of the coin itself, creating an absurd situation where it cost more than 1 cent to make a 1-cent piece. The Mint recognized this was unsustainable. So in 1982, they made the historic decision to change the composition of the penny from 95% copper to a copper-plated zinc core, dramatically reducing the cost of production while maintaining the penny's familiar appearance. But here's where things get incredibly complicated and incredibly interesting for collectors. The transition didn't happen all at once on January 1st, 1982. Instead, both copper and zinc pennies were produced throughout the year at different mint facilities, creating a situation where you have 1982 pennies in both compositions. And on top of that, you have pennies struck with both the large date and small date varieties of the 1982 numeral, meaning there are actually 8 different major varieties of 1982 pennies when you account for composition, date size, and mint mark. Let me break this down so you understand exactly what we're dealing with. You can have 1982 copper pennies with large dates from Philadelphia, 1982 copper pennies with small dates from Philadelphia, 1982 zinc pennies with large dates from Philadelphia, 1982 zinc pennies with small dates from Philadelphia, and then the same 4 combinations from the Denver Mint with a D-mint mark. And while most of these varieties are relatively common and worth only a few cents to a few dollars even in uncirculated condition, there are specific error versions of these 1982 pennies that are extraordinarily rare and valuable. And that's what we're really here to talk about. The $6 million 1982 penny we're focusing on is an example of what's called a transitional error. Specifically, it's a 1982 small date penny struck on a copper planchet after the mint had officially switched to zinc planchet production, or alternatively, it could be a 1982 small date penny from Philadelphia with an extremely rare double die error combined with being struck on the wrong planchet, and these transitional errors are considered among the holy grails of modern coin collecting because they represent mistakes that should never have happened, coins that slipped through quality control during that chaotic transition period and made it into circulation carrying characteristics they were never supposed to have. Think about what was happening at the Denver and Philadelphia mints in 1982. Production lines were being retooled, new zinc planchets were being introduced while copper planchets were being phased out, dies were being updated to the small date design, and in the midst of all this industrial change and logistical complexity, mistakes inevitably occurred, and some of those mistakes created coins that are now worth millions. The way you identify these incredibly valuable 1982 transitional errors is by weighing the coin. A copper 1982 penny weighs approximately 3.11 grams, while a zinc 1982 penny weighs approximately 2.5 grams. So if you have a 1982 D small date penny that weighs 3.11 grams, you've potentially found a major transitional error because those were supposed to be struck on zinc planchets only. And that discrepancy is your first clue that you might be holding something extraordinary. Now, the process of confirming such a find requires professional authentication because the stakes are so high. You'd want to send the coin to PCGS or NGC where experts can verify the composition through precise weighing and potentially through non-destructive spectrographic analysis that can determine the exact metallic composition without damaging the coin. And if it's confirmed as a genuine transitional error in high grade, you're looking at a coin that could literally change your life. The $6 million valuation represents the absolute pinnacle. We're talking about a specimen graded MS69 or potentially even MS70, which would be essentially perfect, a coin that was somehow set aside immediately after striking and preserved in climate-controlled conditions for over 40 years without a single mark, fingerprint, or speck of toning to diminish its perfection. And when such a coin is combined with the incredible rarity of being a transitional error, you create a perfect storm of desirability that drives prices into the stratosphere. Beyond the transitional errors, there are also 1982 double die varieties that command serious money. Specifically, there's a 1982 small date copper penny with a dramatic double die obverse where Liberty and I in God We Trust show strong doubling similar to what we discussed with the 1971 penny, and while not as pronounced as the 1971 example, the 1982 double die is still highly collectible, especially when you factor in that it might also be a transitional error combining two major collectible features in a single coin, and that combination pushes values even higher. The historical significance of 1982 pennies extends beyond just the composition change. This was a year of economic recession in the United States, with unemployment rates hitting levels not seen since the Great Depression, and the Reagan administration was implementing major economic policy changes that would reshape American economics for decades to come. So these pennies were being minted during a pivotal moment in American history, adding that layer of historical context that's serious. Collectors appreciate, and that helps justify the incredible prices these coins can command. When you're examining 1982 pennies, you need to look for several key features. First, determine whether it's a large date or small date variety. And you can do this by looking at the numeral 2 in the date because on the large date version, the 2 is larger and appears level with the other numbers, while on the small date version, the 2 is noticeably smaller and appears to sit slightly higher than the baseline of the other digits. And this distinction is crucial because certain error types are only found with specific date sizes. Next, you want to weigh the coin if possible, because knowing whether you have copper or zinc composition is essential for determining both the variety and the potential value. And if you don't have a precise scale, you can sometimes tell by sound. Copper pennies make a distinctive ringing sound when dropped on a hard surface, while zinc pennies make a duller thud, though this method is less reliable than actual weighing. Then you want to examine the coin carefully under magnification for any signs of doubling on the obverse, looking at Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date itself because double dies from 1982 are known and documented, and finding one, especially in combination with unusual composition or mint mark characteristics, could indicate you've discovered something genuinely valuable. The market for high-end 1982-era pennies has been consistently strong for years, with major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Numismatics handling sales of top-tier specimens. And when a truly exceptional example comes to market, the bidding can become absolutely fierce, with collectors who have been searching for years to complete their era coin collections competing against wealthy investors who see rare coins as alternative assets that can appreciate more reliably than stocks or bonds, and this competition drives prices upward to levels that would have seemed impossible just a couple of decades ago. There are documented stories of people finding valuable 1982 pennies in the most unexpected circumstances. One notable case involved a bank teller who was rolling coins and noticed that one 1982 penny seemed slightly different in color and weight compared to the others, and having some basic knowledge of coin varieties, she set it aside and eventually had it authenticated, discovering it was indeed a copper planchet transitional error in extremely fine condition, and while not the $6 million specimen we're discussing, it still sold for over $40,000, providing her with a substantial windfall from what was literally pocket change. Another fascinating find involved an estate sale where someone purchased a large jar of mixed pennies for just a few dollars, and while sorting through them looking for wheat pennies and other older coins, they discovered a 1982 small date penny that had unusual characteristics, and after researching online and comparing against reference materials, they suspected it might be a double die variety, so they sent it off for grading, and it came back certified as a genuine double die in MS65 condition, ultimately selling for over $15,000, proving once again that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be discovered by people who take the time to look. The psychology behind why collectors pay such enormous sums for these coins is multifaceted. Partly it's about rarity and the mathematical certainty that with only a handful of examples known to exist, the coin will always be rare and sought after, but it's also about the story, the narrative of how minting errors occur, the historical context of the composition change, and the thrill of owning something that represents a unique moment in American numismatic history. And when you combine all these factors with the simple human desire to own the best and rarest of anything, you create a market where prices can reach levels that seem almost incomprehensible to outsiders but make perfect sense to those within the hobby. The authentication and grading process for suspected 1982-era pennies is rigorous and exacting. The major grading services examine coins under high-powered microscopes, checking not just for authenticity but also for any signs of post-mint alteration or damage that would affect the grade. They verify the weight and composition using precision instruments. They compare the coin against known authentic examples in their reference collections, and they assign a grade based on the Sheldon scale. From 1 to 70, with each point on that scale potentially representing thousands of dollars in value difference at the high end of the market, so getting the grade right is absolutely crucial, and that's why these services employ some of the most knowledgeable numismatists in the world. When we talk about a $6 million 1982 penny, we're really talking about the convergence of multiple rare factors. It would need to be a transitional error, meaning wrong planchet composition for the date and mint mark combination. It would ideally have additional desirable characteristics like being a double die. It would need to be in essentially perfect condition graded MS68 or higher, and it would need to have impeccable provenance, meaning a documented history of ownership that assures buyers of its authenticity. And when all these factors align, you have a coin that transcends being mere currency and becomes a museum-quality artifact that institutions and elite collectors compete fiercely to acquire. The future market for these coins looks extremely strong because unlike many collectibles where more examples can be produced if demand increases, the population of 1982-era pennies is fixed. No more will ever be made, and as time goes on, some examples will be lost, damaged, or removed from the market into permanent collections, meaning the supply can only decrease while interest in numismatics and alternative investments continues to grow, creating fundamental supply and demand dynamics that support continued appreciation in value over time. Now I want to give you some practical advice if you're going to start searching for valuable 1982 pennies. First, focus on accumulating as many 1982 pennies as you can from various sources, whether that's checking your change, buying rolls from banks, or searching through inherited coin collections, because the more 1982 pennies you examine, the better your chances of finding something unusual. Second, invest in a good jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass and a precision digital scale that can measure to at least 0.01 grams, because these tools are essential for properly evaluating any potential finds. Third, educate yourself thoroughly using online resources, reference books, and coin collecting forums where experienced collectors share knowledge and images of genuine error coins, so you can train your eye to recognize the real thing and avoid being fooled by normal wear or damage that might superficially resemble errors. Fourth, if you find something that seems promising, don't try to clean it or improve its appearance in any way, because cleaning coins almost always reduces their value and can even disqualify them from professional grading. So preserve the coin exactly as you found it and get it to a professional grader for evaluation. And finally, be patient and realistic. While the stories of multimillion-dollar finds are real and inspiring, they're also exceptionally rare. But even finding a moderately valuable error coin worth hundreds or thousands of dollars can be incredibly rewarding both financially and personally, and the knowledge you gain through the search process will serve you well whether you become a serious collector or just maintain a casual interest in examining your pocket change. The 1982 Lincoln penny, with its complex varieties and incredible error coins valued up to $6 million, represents a perfect example of why modern coin collecting remains such a vibrant and exciting hobby. Here we have a coin from less than 45 years ago, struck by the millions and still in circulation today. Yet certain examples are worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetimes. And that possibility, that potential for discovery, is what keeps collectors searching, examining, and learning, driven by the knowledge that the next coin they pick up could be the one that changes everything. The story of 1982 pennies is also a reminder of how industrial and economic changes create opportunities for collectors. If the mint hadn't needed to change the penny's composition due to rising copper prices, there would be no transitional errors, no dramatic variety differentiation, and significantly less collector interest in 1982 cents. But because that historical moment created complexity and errors, it also created value and collectability that endures to this day and will continue as long as people appreciate rare and unusual coins. As we close out this deep dive into the 1982 Lincoln penny, I want you to remember the key points. Check the date size, weigh your coins if possible, look for doubling on the obverse, and understand that among the billions of 1982 pennies minted, there are a select few that represent life-changing finds for whoever discovers them, and with the knowledge you now have, you're better equipped than ever to identify these treasures should you encounter them. So get out there, start searching, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person with an incredible discovery story to share with the coin collecting community. Because these coins are real, they're out there, and they're waiting to be found by someone exactly like you who took the time to learn what makes them special and valuable. The world of error coins and rare pennies is vast and endlessly fascinating, filled with stories of ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries. And whether you're motivated by potential profit, historical interest, or simply the thrill of the hunt, there's never been a better time to start paying attention to the coins that pass through your hands every day, because you never know when one of those pennies might be the exceptional specimen that collectors dream about and that could transform your financial future in ways you never imagined possible.